Student, good morning. Today I will continue the lecture, that is the blood vascular system of Scoliodon. Remaining part, that is the dorsal aorta of Scoliodon, part of the blood vascular system. The dorsal aorta is formed pair of epibranchial arterial. It runs backwards along the whole length of the body, lying beneath the vertebral column in the trunk. In the tails region, it continues into the hymal canal of the tail vertebrae as the caudal artery. The following are the principal branches of the dorsal aorta. The subclavian arteries are a pair of vessels arising close to the union of four epibranchial arteries. They run outwards and backwards to the pectoral girdle and the pectoral fin of either side, which they supply. The cilioco-mesenteric is a large median artery arising from a dorsal aorta behind. The functions of the fourth pair of epibranchial arteries: it divides into two unequal branches. The celiac supplies the stomach and liver, etc., and the anterior mesenteric supplying the pancreas, the intestine, and rectum. The linogastric artery arises a short distance behind the origin of the celiaco-mesenteric. It is also median blood vessels giving branches supplying the genital organs, posterior part of the intestine, and the spleen, etc. also. The posterior mesenteric artery is small median vessels arising from the aorta, about an inch and a half behind the linogastric. It runs backwards to the mesentery and the rectal glands. The parietal arteries are a series of paired vessels arising at an interval along the whole length of the aorta and supplying the body wall. The renal arteries are small paired vessels arising from the parietal arteries and supplying the kidneys, which they enter from the dorsal surface. The iliac arteries are a pair of vessels similar to the parietal, each of the extending into the pelvic fin. Venous system of Scoliodon. Venous system. In Scoliodon, the blood is distributed to the different parts of the body by arteries and their branches through capillaries and return to the heart by the veins. The veins differ in structure from the arteries in possessing thin walls and forming white irregular spaces called sinuses during their courses. Venous system of Scoliodon. The venous system of Scoliodon can be divided into the following system. Number 1, anterior cardinal system, posterior cardinal system, hepatic portal system, and ventral sinuses. 4 types. Number 1, anterior cardinal system. The anterior cardinal system collects blood from the part of the body which lies anterior to the heart. It consists of a pair of large vessels, the internal jugular veins. Each internal jugular comprises the olfactory sinus. orbital sinus, post-orbital sinus of the anterior cardial sinus. The olfactory sinus lies in between the dorsal ends of the gill pouches and the muscles of the body wall. It opens into the ductus caveri behind the receiving hyoidian sinus from inferior jugular sinus. It also receives blood from the 5 dorsal nutrient branchial sinuses of the gills. Second is posterior cardinal system. The posterior cardinal system collects blood from the part of the body which lies posterior to the heart. It consists of a median caudal vein, 2 renal and 2 large posterior cardinal sinuses. The caudal vein runs below the caudal artery and lies in the hymal arc of the caudal vertebrae. It receives numerous branches on either side from the myotomes of the tail. On entering the abdominal cavity dorsally to the cloaca, the caudal artery bifurcates into 2 branches, the right and left renal portal veins. The renal portal veins continue forward along the dorsal lateral margins of the kidney and give out many branches to the kidney. The renal portal veins receive small portal veins from the body wall. The blood from the sinuses of the kidneys is collected by the renal veins, which join together to form the posterior cardinal sinus. The 2 posterior cardinal sinuses lies close together along the roof of the abdominal cavity. In the posterior regions of the kidney, numerous veins joins to form a median interrenal vein, but in the anterior region of the kidney, the right and left posterior cardinal sinuses are distinct and are separated by a median partition. In the region of the esophagus, the posterior cardinals expand into the wide thin-walled sacs, communications freely with each other. All along their courses, they receive partial veins from the body wall. Finally, each posterior cardinal opens into the Caverian ducts by a relatively small aperture opposite the opening of the naterius cardinal sinus. Third, hepatic portal system. The blood from the alimentary canal and its association gland is collected by a number of veins which unites to form the hepatic portal vein. The hepatic portal vein is formed by the union of the anterior and posterior intestine veins. The large veins to form the receives lineogastric veins and anterior and posterior gastrics, and then run forward to the divides into 2 branches which enters the right and left lobes of the liver. The blood brought from the lobes of the liver by fine capillaries. It is collected by a second set of capillaries which together form 2 large thin-walled sinuses. The hepatic sinuses which opens into the sinus venous by 2 small aperture. Fourth is ventral sinus. The ventral veins comprises two groups. The anterior vein, which discharges their blood into the ductus qveri through the inferior jugular sinuses, and the posterior veins, which empty their blood through the subclavians. Each interior jugular sinus starts just in front of the posterior ventral margins of the first gill cleft and lies beneath the floor of the buccal cavity and pharynx. It is formed by the union of the submental sinus and hyoidian sinus. It collects blood from the ventral regions of the gill pouches. Finally, each interior jugular sinus opens into the ductus qveri of its own side, which it turns opens into the sinus venosus. The subclavian veins of each side is formed by the union of branchial veins, the lateral abdominal veins. The branchial veins is formed by the union of cloacal veins from the cloaca and femoral veins from the pelvic fin in the posterior abdominal cavity. The two lateral abdominal veins are connected with each other through the commissural veins. This is the dorsal aorta and blood vascular system of Scoliodon. Okay, thank you.